Association of Directory Publishers webinar. I'm Diane with ADP's Membership Services. Today's webinar is how you can strategically target SMB digital needs with Paul Engels from Veloxsites. We keep a list of our upcoming webinars at the ADP website, adp.org, and we also send out regular emails announcing upcoming webinars, so be sure you're on our mailing list. During the webinar, you may ask a question at any time during the presentation by using the question queue box located on the GoToWebinar dashboard. We will open it up for questions toward the end of the presentation. At this time, I would like to introduce Paul Engels.
Thank you very much, Diane. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much for coming to our session today. Really appreciate it. My name is Paul Engels. I'm the CEO of Veloxsites. I'm joined on the call in the audience with my Head of Business Development, Jack Branch. A brief word of introduction. Jack and I together, between us, have spent an enormous amount of time serving the service provider industry going back decades. We have been involved in helping large and medium-sized service providers, directories, publishers, telecoms, internet service providers, domain registrars all over the world become more successful in marketing and selling new digital services from really the dawn of internet services period. We've learned a lot in our journey and really appreciate the chance today to share some of the best practices we've picked up along the way and update with some very recent research that Veloxsites has undertaken on your behalf. Diane, you'll just have to give me one quick tip on moving the slideshow forward. There we go. We got it. My apologies. So let's start off with a notion that might seem a little bit provocative. There is endless talk amongst us in this industry. We all tend to, on this call, share the same challenges. We have strategic mandates, all of us, to sell more services, to please our customers, give them the services that meet their needs, and to earn their revenue, hopefully on a monthly recurring basis as a result. There's a lot made of digital services versus traditional advertising services and the massive growth of digital services, but it really begs the question, are digital services really just another wasteland of failed business opportunity, or is there in fact really a gold mine available to us as service providers? It may seem like a ridiculous question, but believe me, it is not. We have regular conversations with the leading executives of major organizations that include massive telecoms like Verizon and Bell Canada, large directories like Superpages, Dex Media, BT directories, and in day-to-day conversations with executive management team, we find that these organizations are massively unsatisfied with the performance that they have gained in selling digital services. We hear anecdotal comments like, we sell digital services really because it's strategic and we have to, but we make no money on it. We've heard comments from the CEOs of these organizations like, we're highly disappointed with the results after years of marketing these services. Given how big our brands are, we've only managed to penetrate or get low single-digit adoption on the part of our clients. So despite all the ballyhoo, and even studies as recently as the recent most Burrell 2015 study on SMB spending, which would indicate to us that there's a massive surge towards digital advertising replacing traditional advertising, the results from the part of service providers are simply just not bearing that out. So the question we have is, how does one as a service provider find the digital gold that is apparently out there but somehow eluding us by perhaps the way that we're going to market and the way that we're presenting these services to our customers? Today's presentation is really to tap into some new research and discover some of the many factors that are contributing towards the how to and how not to sell digital services with a new paradigm that we'd like to share with you. In our own investigations at Veloxsites into the psychology and the buying and adoption habits of small businesses, we undertook our own custom research, and we'll be sharing the results of 2 studies that we've undertaken on our own with you today. The first one was conducted a few months ago. It was a 360-degree set of interviews with small businesses themselves, service providers who attempt to sell digital services to them, and also some competitors in our category. We have that available, by the way, in an ebook or a research abstract, but I'm just going to lift 3 of the major findings out of that study. There was a fair bit to learn, but 3 things stood out. Small businesses have overwhelmingly indicated to us that they are absolutely under siege with prospecting in the term of telephone calls, personal door-knocking visits, and other manner of service providers attempting to sell them digital services. And that massive amount of prospecting and cold calling out there has tended to erode the trust. Small businesses are just awash in a sea of noise, if you will, regarding digital services, and they're not entirely sure who to believe and whether there's any validity to a lot of the claims that are being made by everyone from SEO providers to web hosts to you name it. And they've indicated that they really want to dialogue with a provider of services that understands their needs and is willing to take them through the steps to get them to be more successful online. Secondarily, the SMBs indicated that their #1 goal is to be found locally. It's all about sales leads and more traffic and more business. It's the #1 motivator in their organization. And if digital services can help them in that regard, they're going to be happy. What that does, by the way, is introduce a massive challenge to service providers, because really what the small business is asking for is attribution. They want to know that if they invest in a particular digital or other advertising service of yours, that they can connect the dots between that spend and some positive business outcome. And our research told us that small businesses are shockingly unreasonable when it comes to their demand for attribution. It's just the nature of the beast. We've heard anecdotal stories like, well, I signed up to this new website service almost 3 weeks ago, and I can't even see that my sales have gone up as a company. It's literally as though they haven't given the internet time to even register their site, and they're looking for that instant attribution. So that's a challenge they're going to put on your doorstep to come through and perform. The third thing that we overwhelmingly heard from small businesses is the notion that they are busy as owner-operators running and managing their small business. They simply don't have the time to take hours, days, or weeks to become marketing experts or much less webmasters. So when it comes to digital services and the delivery of those services, they absolutely insist that these services be largely done for them with respect to improving their online presence. They'll participate a little bit, but the emphasis there is a little bit. This poses a couple of a serious opportunity and a challenge. Our research indicated to us that absolutely small and medium-sized businesses can demonstrate and admit that they do have digital needs. Further to that, they've indicated a strong willingness to spend, and they are doing so. It's not just our research, but I cited the Burrell research. Endless studies are tracking on a quarterly basis. We see them on the blogs and the newsletters that spending levels are going up. Our own research validated that when it comes to online presence, either creating a new website or improving an existing website and its ability to do the job, fully 66% of all small businesses indicate, and we're talking at the owner, operator, manager level, 66% have indicated a willingness to spend dollars in the next 18 months to improve what they've currently got. So that's got to be positive. It tells us that somewhere out there in that wasteland, maybe there is some gold. But what are the challenges or impediments that are holding us back from successfully marketing to those stated needs? The first we found is targeting. When you take a large advertiser base that many of you may be responsible for, cherry picking precisely who needs what out of that base can be daunting. And back to the research we conducted, small businesses really get frustrated by and resent individuals who are playing the 20 questions game with them to first interview them to death to figure out what they're doing, and then and only then be in a position to make a recommendation. They find it tedious, and it's really a sign, if you're a service provider, it almost reveals to them a lack of ignorance or a lack of knowledge on your part, that you need to use them to tell you what they might happen to need. And by the way, they're not really sure what they need themselves. So it's kind of a dysfunctional conversation and very hard to generate sales traction in that environment. So let's go about seeing if we can crack this code and get through these challenges and more to the opportunity and find the gold. I'll pause here for just a second. There'll be 2 very short breaks in the presentation before questions at the end. But before we move into some statistics, are there any immediate questions that anyone would like to table at this time? And if not, fear not, we'll have plenty of time towards the end. All right, perfect. Starting off with some basic statistics. It doesn't take but a day that you open up a copy of USA Today in the business pages. It's probably every week in some major business journal. Some huge credible source, usually Google, is reporting how many businesses have a website and how many businesses don't have a website. And it's lamented that fully half, or so it is felt, of all businesses lack a basic online presence. The issue I have with that figure is that it's so large and it's so ungranular that it makes better headline news than any actionable follow-up that we can actually move towards. Our attempts to break down those statistics a little further split things into the 50 that do and the 50 that don't. And if we look at this website, or sorry, at this pie chart, we get the notion that of the half that arguably don't or reputedly do not have a web presence, 32% of those probably never will need one. Waste of time to even try to sell them something. Could be the dry cleaner on the corner. They probably just don't need a website, or they're a franchise operation that already has one through a franchise head. There are many, many reasons why presence is not necessary for that organization. Another group do need a website. Moving to the left-hand side of the pie chart, we see of those who already have a web presence, just knowing that they have or don't have is just not nearly informative enough to us, because in further investigation, we discovered that small businesses who have a website, 20% of them are actively looking and eager to replace the site for any number of reasons. It's old, it's stale, their business model changed, they don't like the layout anymore, the images are behind the times, and they've got dollars to spend. They're just looking for help to get from where they started to where they'd like to go. Even if it's not a full replacement, there are numerous ways that small businesses are quite eager to spend money to enhance the appearance or the effectiveness of their web presence. So they've got an interest in spending money, provided someone can meet them with the correct needs. Absolutely, it's the case that a huge population of sites today are not mobile responsive. That's a pretty critical factor, considering that north of 70% of all consumer searches are conducted from a smartphone of some sort. And it's also known that effective April, no news to us on this call, Google has massively altered their search algorithms to downgrade and devalue websites and their search rankings based on the fact that they may not be mobile responsive to smart devices. So inside that 50-50 split, which is way too high level, there's a lot going on that tells us as service providers, before we can wade into the space, we might want to learn a little bit more about the individual subcategories and how they're represented amongst our advertiser bases that we serve. In order to do that, Veloxsites has gone to another level of research that we just concluded in the last week. And we got our hands on 14 million US business records as groomed by Axiom, a known provider of such records. We conducted a computer randomized sampling to extract 10,000 of those 14 million records, which gives us a very reliable indicator of what small businesses are up to on the internet today. This is my only brag of the entire presentation. My CFO, who conducted this survey, insisted I say it. This is the most comprehensive analysis of online presence for businesses ever done in the history of the planet. I'm pausing there for laughter. If anyone on this call wants to email me and tell me that it's not the most comprehensive analysis, we'll happily increase our sample size from 10,000 to 50,000. But moving right along, we learned an extraordinary amount from this exercise. I'm going to quickly go through a number of slides that just generate some statistics and what we heard on the basis of what small businesses are doing out there. And the first is, on the 10,000 sample, compare and contrast this to the 50-50. This chart looks a little bit different, doesn't it? we found that 43% of all businesses surveyed had some form of independent, verifiable website that we could find through our analytics. We found that roughly a third, we could not find a website. That didn't necessarily mean that they didn't have one. It just meant that if they did have one, it was so difficult to find, even training server searches on them, that they may as well not have one because they're just undiscoverable. We found a third category which is fairly interesting, and that is businesses who have some form of directory listing which looks to what we would call something like a pseudo website. It is a form of web presence. It's just not an independent, manageable website that the small business can lay claim or ownership to. It's better than nothing in our opinion, but it's certainly not as good as it could be. So just on our very first attack on the statistics, we started to get a much more granular idea as to what individual businesses were doing or attempting to do out there. The second area that we found fascinating, and believe me, behind each one of these slides with large numbers like this, there are entire tables of granular detail, but I like to extract the informational nuggets. And in this case, of the businesses surveyed, 49% we found had no social media presence whatsoever. Where we did find social media presence, it was typically on Facebook, which is by far the leading choice of social media presence for a small business to get a listing with. But the fact of the matter is vast numbers of small businesses are still apparently quite slow to adopt social media. Directory presence was fairly interesting, and in this case we found that we as an industry and you on this call have done a pretty good job over the years. Directories, and in this case we're referring to digital directories. We are not able to search for print directory presence using Google, but we certainly can see what digital directories are doing. And 60% of all businesses are actually registered with 5 or more directories. Now, if you were trying to market to companies like this, that could be a pretty interesting indicator because it might tell you that some of your customers have an opportunity for improved management of their directory presence. Once you get into, as a small business, having 5 or more directory listings, your problem might actually be duplicates and mismanagement. Something like syndication management might be a tremendous service for you to consider. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, we found that literally 1 out of 5 businesses had no directory presence whatsoever. Clearly that type of business has an entirely different problem. It could be that they're just digitally unaware or naive and very slow to adopt. And the type of solution you would market to a 0 versus a 5 or more, even the sales pitch you would take out on a client like that would be entirely different. It would be kind of crazy to go to a 0 directory prospect and start preaching the benefits of syndication management because they'd have no idea, understandably, about what you're talking about. So this is some of the foreshadowing of the useful uses to which we can put some of these statistics. We did a test on homepage word count for those small businesses that actually had a web page. We know from best practices, Google Analytics and other sources, that it's wise to have at least 300 words on your homepage if you want to maximize your search engine optimization. And lo and behold, we discovered that 66% of all businesses have 200 words or less. So there's a massive opportunity there and a cry for help, perhaps even unstated by your business clientele, that content is definitely necessary. People need, small businesses are not marketing experts, and they're desperate for content that can put some substance on their web pages to actually make them easier to find. It's another area that I have to feel holds massive opportunity for anyone who is in the directory or publishing business. Fundamentally, you're selling them advertising. If you're taking out print ads on the behalf of your business, probably you know more about the nature of that of your advertiser's business than they do themselves. If you've got the ability to take your knowledge of their business to the next level, it could be as simple as adding some content and some words to the correct account on their website. It's not just about quantity of words, as we well know. It's also about SEO relevant word density. for those on the call that may be unfamiliar, it's taking the unique keywords that describe what business a business is in and making sure that those keywords repeat themselves at an appropriate percentage within the copy of their website. And this is kind of a tricky one for businesses because if your word density is too low, SEO doesn't respond very well to you. If your word density is above 7%, the opposite happens. Google's algorithms start to feel that you're kind of spamming or over-promoting your keywords, and they downgrade you on that basis. It's felt that between 6 and 7% is kind of the sweet spot in the ideal, and we find in our statistical analysis across the 10,000 businesses that only 1 in 5 businesses with a website has got that ratio correct. It's another hugely revealing piece of information that can help you serve that organization. Moving to the more broad categories of SEO, we can see that there are a lot of things in this area. We could probably run an entire webinar for a couple of days on this subject alone, but we'll keep it really brief here. It was still nevertheless revealing. Just in quickly scanning down the percentage of site owners and how they're doing on SEO, we can see that generally folks are very successful in the area of page description, not doing too badly in the area of formatting and maybe even robots. But some real misses would include things like email. I grabbed, just as a matter of interest, print publications, yellow page books and the like, and I like to flip through and just scan ads, and I'm astounded to the degree to which small businesses will proudly proclaim their website domain or URL right in their ad, yet the contact us has some lame Hotmail or Gmail email address rather than using a domain-based email address. And we can see that on SEO, that's A, a downgrade, and B, a lot of businesses seem to be misunderstanding that. So we get some real targeted ideas here in a user base as to who needs what. If we were to wrap all of those slides that we just peeled through into kind of a nice one-glance summary, it shows us what a market opportunity might look like across your own publisher base, because clearly these analytics, we don't need to do them on Axiom's listings. We should be doing them on your advertiser list. To me, this is just like a fantastic description of opportunity. Going from left to right, 1 out of 3 businesses needs a new website. 1 out of 4 businesses has a directory site that is calling out for an upgrade into a proper standalone website. Over half of businesses out there need an upgrade towards a mobile responsive site because they're currently not mobile responsive. And on and on. Almost a third social media they require help with. Over a third require help in establishing or improving their directory presence, etc., etc. If you're a publisher and you're considering entering the digital services space with new services, or if you're in that space, a chart like this would perhaps help guide you to some opportunities. It might be that you're currently evaluating third-party value-added services. You're looking to maybe sign up to some white label services provided by many vendors such as Veloxsites who are here to try to help you. This roadmap might give you some focus as to which opportunities you might want to go after first. For instance, SEO is always a high score, and if you're looking at 2 or 3 roadmap items next year, the combination of web presence on the left-hand side of the chart and content management and SEO might literally govern what services you launch, when you launch them, and to whom you would launch them. So this could really be terrific as a business planning exercise for you as well. A lot of data. So I'll take a quick pause on the statistical side and see if we have any immediate questions that we can answer now.
There are no questions at this time.
Okay, thank you, Diane.
Mm-hmm.
So armed with this significantly better view of what's going on out there in the actual online performance of small businesses, how do we then better engage small businesses so that they respond to our offers? One of the first things we learned, as I mentioned in a previous slide, is that SMBs actually admit to having needs, and they indicate that they have high intentions of purchasing the correct services. However, They also indicated to us, and not just in our own surveys, but in other research we've seen, that these same small businesses, while eager to spend money if it can solve a problem for them, really have a reluctance to take on much in the way of any work themselves. The whole notion of do-it-yourself, in my mind, is entirely broken, and I'd like to provide a couple of examples that back that up. Do-it-yourself tools have been around for years and years. Let's just take an example of website creators. There are literally dozens of superb WYSIWYG, drag-and-drop, do-it-yourself website creators that purport to allow anyone with a completely programming skill to be able to use. We see an adoption rate currently being tracked at approximately 2% that says for every 100 businesses that you expose a do-it-yourself tool to, at best, 2% will embrace that tool and take it to end of task and actually build their own website. That information can be easily backed up if one were to conduct or to make reference to the investment analysts that have funded organizations. This is all public domain. Headline companies who advertise strongly, like Wix and Weebly, inside their investor relations kits will let folks know that they typically count on approximately a 1% conversion rate. So of 100 individuals that open up an account and try their do-it-yourself tool, they start to do fairly well at approximately 1% adoption. So down between 1 and 2%. To me, this is small businesses, your customers, are massively voting with their habits and saying, I don't want to do this by myself. The flip side of that is do it for me, where you invest in the experts and the consultants and the designers to shoulder all the burden of heavy lifting of creating sites and improving sites. And the fact of that matter is it's a highly expensive headcount-driven model, mostly based on time and material. It can absolutely work, but it doesn't scale very well, and it usually hits some fairly high retail prices in order for you to pay yourself back for that labor you put in. We'd like to suggest a different paradigm altogether, and that would be to start with any digital initiative that you contemplate taking out by sending your salespeople to sell new services, launching some new marketing campaigns. If you're looking to do better in this world or to enter this world, we would strongly advise that you start with a comprehensive set of customer analytics. Go through the forensic analysis that we went through on our 10,000 tests and help yourself identify and target precisely which customers do you have, what do they need in specific, and what particular online services can you present the individual customer needs situation that will match up with the situation they're in, rather than doing a product-based approach, which is to pick the flavor of the day. Let's just pick SEO because it's a very good one, and just uniformly presenting SEO to all of your customers, basing it on a question and answer process. It just doesn't work. Analytics are critical, and it's the first step. The second step we would advise is to conduct automated provisioning of the services that you're looking to put out. If it's selling or improving a new website, if it's converting someone from a non-responsive to a responsive website, if it's taking somebody's existing website and then adding onto it some geo pages or geo domain pages to boost their search engine optimization by helping them market better, don't require your customer to build that site. Don't make them spend hours with a designer to build the site. Use automated technology to automatically provision those things and get it to the point that it's 80% done. Thirdly and finally, and we'll talk about this a little bit more at the end of the presentation, have some backup service available either with your in-house staff or an outside program to provide a little bit of fulfillment. Between automation and fulfillment, we here at Veloxsites refer to something that we call the 90-10 rule. That might be aspirational, but even if it's only 70-30, it's still a good way to go. And that says use automation to get 70 to 80% of the work done for your customer, and then use fulfillment for the final 10, 20, or 30%. That ratio is going to put you in a high profit zone. It's also going to please your customer much better because it will reduce the work that they have to provide. Now, we went through a lot of analytics before in the previous slides, and we presented them as somewhat of an abstract, but these same analytics can be repackaged for any individual publisher or service provider situation. we have the ability to package a lot of these statistics into a very easy to follow report. This one is simply called Market Match. And Market Match is just a high-level overview that can give you and your specific situation a pointer as to where your customer needs are. I've taken the name off of this particular live customer example, and I've substituted the Veloxsites logo. But this is a large, actually I should say a mid-sized publisher operating in the US. They provided over 100,000 advertiser records to us, and we were able to pinpoint that 61% of their base we could discover a site, 39% not so, and we could pinpoint the number of responsive versus non-responsive sites, etc., etc. It's just an example of what an analytics report can look like for you. The second view I'd like to show you is something that we think is very important. We developed this on request of some publishers that told us it would come in handy, and we think it's got tremendous opportunity. And that is, to my mind, it's not sufficient that you've done the analytical analysis and you know everything there is to know about your customer. Wouldn't it be nice if they shared the same view that you did? Why can't they have access to analytics so that when you're speaking to an advertiser, you can actually be on the same page and referring to the same information and working together on a business plan to get them the right services? So we packaged up some analytics under the name Web Health Report, and we have the ability to email this. You can run these for your clients in real time. You can do them in large batches. You can make them available in hard copy for your salespeople. They can email them out. It just gets your customer on the same page and lets them help evaluate their own situation so that you're working together to solve their needs rather than you simply being a salesperson that's trying to tell them and dictate to them what they happen to need. It's great for credibility. Let's show a little example of what automation might look like since we talked about it. On a webinar like this, it's hard to do a live demonstration, but I think you'll get the picture from this slide. We went out to the internet and just took any leading digital online directory. In this case, we just happened to pick Manta. It could have been anybody. And we found a typical ad listing. Here's a company called Homeland Construction, LLC. They've got a terrific looking Manta online directory ad. You can see a logo, hours of operation, the usual stuff that the consumer would like to discover if they manage to get linked over to Manta. However, that particular advertiser has no website. That's not a good thing. Our technology is able to scrape and uncover the data that's resident within their ad and use the same information to convert it into a very compelling website. Here they've got a 3-page site with home, about us, contact. It's got images, a terrific modern look design. And we think that's very important for new users who at this date do not yet have a web presence. And we call it a spec site. It's not the most unique concept in the world because after all, if you're a publisher, you've been selling on the basis of spec ads for the longest time. And you know yourselves that if you tried to get a small business to take out a print ad with you and you left them with a blank sheet of paper to design their own, you wouldn't sign them up forever. We're looking to accelerate the same decision-making process with automation. Show the small business something that's reasonably good and get them to just advise you on changes. It's back to that 80-20 rule. If we can do it for one site, our patented technology can do it for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of sites. If your user base, like that market match report a couple of slides ago, suggests that there are upwards of 30,000 advertisers that you may have on a large base without a web presence, we believe automation can meet the needs and deliver a spec site to each and every one of those prospects instantly. It's a great way to scale the business and make a lot more money, but most importantly, it shows your prospects something to look at rather than a blank sheet of paper. What are the results of a process like this? Well, the paradigm is powerful. By combining analytics with automated provisioning and following up with the right amount of fulfillment services and customer handholding, we can massively increase the adoption that you currently experience. We know because we've spoken to these organizations. BT Directories is the largest print advertising book in England with 1 million paid advertisers. They lament the fact that only 5% of their customer base has onboarded themselves with web presence and digital services. We see similar numbers reported across North American directories and elsewhere in the world. Low single digit is the rule of the day. With analytics and automated provisioning and a spec site approach, we've seen empirical examples that are 3 to 5 times the adoption rate because it's just so much more compelling for your salespeople and the customer. The small businesses' needs are met, and they actually get to see first what solution is going to solve their needs. And with a web health report, they can even get proof and attribution before and after the fact, so you're not selling some kind of vague promise or SEO snake oil to your customers. You're actually selling them what they need and proving that it's working for them. We'd like to suggest that this is the happy path. There are a lot of ways down into that great big mining dirt pit that are not very happy and do not lead to the gold, and we've seen it over and over again. On our model, and particularly for members of the ADP, we've partnered with 2 very well-known and respected organizations, Digital Marketing Inc. and Design Wizards, and together with them we've created a rapid implementation solution, something that can get you up and running on the service a lot quicker without the fuss, the cost, and the drama. All we need together as a team to get you started is a sample of your advertiser list, and we can run it through our analytics and show you exactly where the gold is and how to tap it. Really appreciate the time you've given us today. For further follow-up, I strongly recommend there's any one of 3 ways. You can contact Jack, my colleague and VP of Business Development. His contact particulars are here on screen. Certainly if you're doing business with Design Wizards or DMI, you know those folks well. Feel free to reach out and learn a little bit more about this program. I thank you very much for your time. I hope this was useful. We certainly set out to give you more a statistical illumination of what's going on in the business today with some best practices as opposed to a straight-on sales pitch. I hope we met your needs in that regard. I'm wide open for questions if anyone has any.
Currently, we have no more questions, but if anyone would like to submit one, we can take them. Okay.
Well, Diane, it's one of 2 things in these circumstances. This presentation was either so perfect it answered all possible questions, or it completely missed the mark. I'm an optimist, so I'm going with the former.
I'll agree with that. Well, since we don't have any more questions, thank you for attending, and thank you, Paul and Jack, for conducting this webinar today.
Thanks very much, Diane. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon.